Right. So thank you very much, Jade, for being so willing to speak with me today. I'm very excited to hear more about your story and all of the major speech improvements that you've made over the last several weeks as well. So just wanted to start off by issuing a big thanks to you and would love to just get started by asking you to share a bit about what life was like before you started working with Michael in the Pro90D speech system. What was every day like, every speaking situation like?
Yeah, man. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm very excited to have this chat. As you mentioned, I'm Jade, and I've been a member of the Pro90D community now for a few years. In terms of what life was like before I found Michael, I would say it wasn't too rough for me overall. My major issues would show up in more high pressure moments, meaning like at work or if I had to go give a presentation and so on. These were the areas where I found that I would have the most problems, so to speak. And so for me, I was able to move through most of life fine in terms of school and friends and like social life and so on. I was pretty okay there. But the problems would again arise in those high pressure key moments. And I knew that in order for me to learn how to thrive in those moments, I needed to take things to the next level. And I want to say I found Pro 90D in or around 2018, 2019 is when I first found Michael's coaching on YouTube. And I found his content online and I watched his stuff for maybe just a year straight. Literally every video, I watched it. And I think when I actually pulled the trigger, the first thing I did was I got the course, and I did not opt for the coaching at first because I thought that the course was just enough, and I only needed a little help. So I would be able to move through this course on my own and be fine. And it turns out that that was not the case. I just needed the next level in coaching, but I did not actually go for the coaching until around 2020. If I recall correctly, it was around COVID time where all of us had to work from home. And I just knew I needed the next level in terms of one-on-one coaching. And so 2020 is where our relationship bloomed in a more one-on-one area. And then I've since had coaching with him, I want to say 3 or 4 times since first joining the one-on-one coaching in 2020, you know?
Excellent. And obviously, just in case it's not yet clear to the audience, when you're saying uh, that you had the coaching 3 or 4 times, you mean multiple sessions, and each of those segments occupied one episode of coaching, basically. So likely at this stage, you've had several sessions more.
A lot more than several, a lot more than several. So yes, each coaching, each group of calls, I did a few that were 8 sessions. I had a few which were 10. And then this most recent stretch we had was 12. So I think all in all, I'm in at least about 60 coaches with Michael, like 60 classes with Michael, at
Wow,
least.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And um, just to dive a little more deeply into sort of what your baseline was before we speak more about how things have been during and since the coaching, were there any specific situations, speaking situations that felt impossible at the time back before you had started doing any work on your speech, any coaching with Michael?
Yeah. I think uh, presentations. And I think I noticed that for me, anytime I was too too much of one emotion. If I was too anxious, if I was too happy, I would have a hard time. And learning how to become more aware of those was one of the first things I learned how to do in the coaching. Um, I think for the most part, just like moving through life and having to talk to my friends and like everyday life wasn't like stressful. Um, but I had moments where it just felt impossible. And if you put me on the spot and I had to give an impromptu presentation or talk, I would have a very hard time. And so I think for me, that was one of, if not the main area where I knew I just needed help. You know what I mean? And I sought it out.
Thank you for that. So now diving more specifically into what your coaching experience specifically was like. This is a two-part question, but what would you say was the most important mindset shift that you had during the coaching, and what would you say was the most important speaking style or technique shift that you had? So really in this question, hoping to dive into the holistic nature, both the mental and the physical shifts and changes that you ended up having
Mhm.
as you embarked on this journey.
Yeah. So in terms of mindset shifts, having the coaching with Michael, I've had my mindset shifted multiple times. I think one of the core things that I had to learn, or one of the core beliefs I had to form, was that the way that you speak is a habit. It is merely a habit. And like all habits, they can be changed. You can choose to improve them, you can choose to replace them with new ones. But the way you walk, the way you talk, how you react emotionally to certain things, what foods you perhaps feel drawn to, these are all habits. And I think for most of my life prior to meeting Michael, I had not realized that it was just a habit and it was just a function of how the brain works. I thought, I was losing control or some force was acting upon me. And I'm sure that other people watching this know the feeling of like feeling as though I'm cursed. You know what I mean? And so for me, learning from him that, hey, this is just a habit. It was a habit you learned in your childhood, and through emotional beliefs and certain traumas and what happened to you over time, this habits this habit grows stronger and stronger. But one of the most powerful mindset shifts he taught me, and what allowed me to really open up towards our freedom, was that you can change this habit. You can absolutely change how you speak. You can learn how to speak slower. You can learn how to extend more of your words. You can learn how to use your hands as I'm doing right now. These are all habits that, with enough conscious intention and practice, you absolutely can change. And so I think once that part for me clicked, the other things in terms of techniques became easier to accept. And then in terms of the most powerful shifting technique, for me, it was slowing all the way down. I come from a culture that naturally talks very quickly. I'm from Jamaica, and so my mom talks fast. Everyone in my family talks fast. The culture of how we move and how we talk in the islands is quicker. And so, as a young boy, having a speech impediment and that, it's like, oh man. And so, for me, just learning from Michael that you can take your time. I can choose to consciously slow down at any point. And once I learned that through slowing down how fast I spoke, I just have more control and I felt more relaxed. And so I would say on the technique side, it was learning how to slow down and learning how to breathe more as well, you know?
Excellent, excellent. I think those are many of the same mental and physical changes that I and others I speak with have also experienced once they start working on their speech. And I think it's one of those things that once you have that shift, much like the law of accelerating acceleration, once you have that shift, things just become much easier. You've completely just leveled up and opened an entirely new world. So I want to ask you something else, which is kind of on this notion of belief. Did you ever have moments where, you spent weeks or months working on this? I know that you mentioned that you had, kind of gone through these four or so distinct coaching phases. So you've obviously been in this process for a fairly extended amount of time. And I just wanted to ask if you had moments where you did not believe it would work, where you were seeing in your own everyday life that you were trying so hard to do something, but it just seemed not to be working, and also how all of that ties back to this idea of effort defeats itself.
Yeah, yeah. I think my belief was challenged multiple times. And I think that one of the things that I struggled with at the beginning of the journey actually was really believing that modeling worked. I had a hard time, I would say, for the first 1 or 2 years, I really had a hard time understanding modeling and having it click in my brain that I could effectively model Michael or anyone else. I just really had a hard time. For whatever reason, my brain is too logical, where it's like, no, I'm me and I feel like me. How can I learn to, embody the traits of a whole other person? But I think after a few tries, modeling over time, I learned how to make modeling feel more easy. But absolutely, at the beginning, I did not believe that it worked. I thought it was some woo stuff that it sounded good and that I can still make progress by merely focusing and honing in on the techniques. And I can just leave modeling off to the side and maybe it'll click for me at some point in the future, maybe not. But modeling was one of the ones I can clearly recall just me having a hard time with. And then what was the other part of the question? Sorry about that.
Also just how like this notion of effort defeats
Oh,
itself, and whether you had moments where you felt you were just trying so hard, but yet things were not working in your favor.
hmm yeah. This was a gem I got from Michael on one of our last coaching calls where he was like, in all mental workings, as you said, effort defeats itself. And so the harder you try something and you're forcing it, you're trying it, literally all you're probably doing is creating so much more tension in the body and you're trying to be perfect. And one of the main things that I've learned throughout this entire journey is that the more I tried, if let's say I'm having a job interview, let's say I'm having a job interview coming up and I really wanted this job and I'm walking in there and in my mind, I'm so honed in on, I got to be perfect. I have to say every word perfectly and flawlessly. I'm literally psyching myself out. And so, as you so aptly said, the more we try and the more we tend to resist things, and the harder and harder we try, the harder and harder it seems to not work in our favor. And so, for me lately, I'm learning how to just release the effort, release this force, release how hard I'm trying in the current moment, learning to just accept that the current moment is what it is. And I've also been playing around with learning how to be more mindful of my emotions. Because You can try to work on the techniques, I promise you, as hard as you want. But if you are still inside feeling anxious, feeling worried, um, the techniques won't help you as much as if you instead really, really focused on and you learn to internalize being calm, feeling more relaxed and at peace. And so for me, I'm learning now that I'm at a phase where effort needs to drop and I need to instead shift into a mode where my main focus is how can I be as relaxed and as calm as a fan, you know?
It's great. And just as we start wrapping up here, we opened up obviously with what life was like before you started all of this, and would
Mhm.
love to have us end by you sharing what does life feel like now? How are your speaking situations now? I know that you have a very, very busy social and professional life. You're always on meetings, you're always speaking with various clients, and I think it would mean a lot to our audience just to hear a sense of how all of those interactions and experiences are now going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think life now feels um, a lot more freeing. I don't have this weird hidden weight hanging on my shoulders anymore. And in terms of growth, one of the areas in which I've grown the most is in business. So I launched my own business a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And one of the main aspects I've had to learn how to really improve in terms of skill is sales. And as you, I'm sure, know, marketing and sales is like the lifeblood of any successful business. And so I used to be very uncomfortable with like sales and I got to go and pitch myself. It felt kind of weird and slimy. And then I also have this, speech thing. And I would say that in the last year, I've literally had to do sales calls. And so I'm talking to strangers for 30, 45 minutes, at times an hour, multiple times per day. And you have to talk in a way that's informative, it's high trust, and you need to be persuasive enough to get a stranger to give you thousands of dollars. And so in terms of, you know, how I've learned how to use all of the tools from Pro90D in my actual real life, it's been transformative in terms of what it's been able to help me accomplish in sales, in growing my business. I'm now also a new father, and so I have a son who I talk to every night. I'm reading him books he loves to read, and seeing how much I've grown as a man, as a leader, as a father, as a lover, just by mere just by mere virtue of improving improving our communication skills. And so I would say that if anyone who is wondering, if I should take the time to learn or to really, seek to improve in this one key area, I would say it's an absolute must. It bleeds out into every other aspect and facet of your life. I've I now have stronger relationships. I'm now closer to my mom and my father. I'm now closer to my lady. Um, and I, of course, have also improved in sales. And so it's absolutely been a long, long, long journey for me. It's been hard, but so, so worth it, you know?
Excellent. Well, Jade, it's just always an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I learn so much through all of our conversations, and I'm sure that will only further continue. So, just again, wanted to thank you for speaking with me, and I look forward to seeing how the next several weeks and months ahead of your speaking journey go as well, because as you know, this is something that we are the excellent news in all of this is that we're always getting better, right? It's you reach a stage where speech becomes so easy and effortless, but even then you are always able to further improve. And that's how you know that you are exactly on the right track. So, once again, thank you.
Of course, bro. As always, man, I enjoy our chats, and I hope to have one more of these at the end of the year and just to see the growth. You know what I mean? So, of
Absolutely.
course, I appreciate your time, Bob.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again, Jade. Appreciate it.
All right,
Bye.
man. Have a good
Take
one,
care.
brother.